Okay.
This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube. And back today we have Ella LeBain from Who's Who in the Cosmic Zoo, author, UFO, UAP researcher. From nearby me in Kansas, she's from Colorado. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Devin.
Looking stylish in your pink leather jacket.
Well, it's cold, even indoors.
Yes, for the fans of this channel in Canada, it's nothing in Colorado compared to Canada, but it gets pretty cold in Colorado.
Yeah, we just came through that cold snap, the polar vortex. It was minus 11, so 32 today. We'll take it.
Oh yeah, that's to get into the minuses is pretty bad. So
Absolutely.
far, I mean, we were supposed to hear from Donald Trump about the drones on the 21st. He ended up asking his secretary to look into it on the 21st publicly. It's now the end of the day on the 23rd. Still nothing. Have you heard any updates about what they may have been? I mean, they've been around for a while. That whole hoopla about them started since our last interview. So maybe we could start there, telling us your theories about that.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I did hear that on his live press conference on Inauguration Day. And it seems like he was nonchalant about it because it's like he already knew, and he has made references to it being experimental technology, and that if it was a foreign adversary, it would have been blown up by now. So I've heard him say that twice, and on the 21st, on the 20th, the day he was that press conference when he asked Susie, "Can we get the information?" So I thought that was a little revealing. So when it comes to this thing, you got to like connect dots. So I remember at the end of September 29th, I believe, 24, Elon Musk had posted to be ready for the drone wars. So, and then about 5 weeks later, it all started. So I think, in my opinion, I think it's like a multi-layered thing, but I think that the main thing was that these aerospace companies like Lockheed and Lockheed Martin and Bigelow Industries, maybe, and the big names, they were testing their new technologies. And I know that Lockheed had announced at some point that they were experimenting with plasma technology. So, I mean, if anybody goes to my Facebook page, I have posted all these videos there. And there's one, that was taken over New Jersey of, this very colorful, phantasmagorical, rainbow plasmoid thing that just keeps morphing and changing. And I think that's it. However, the other layer to it is the Chinese drones. So I think it was in November, Maria Bartiromo on her show, she had what's his name? Chen. He's kind of like our diplomat, and
Yeah,
yeah, you know who I'm talking about.
yeah.
And they, and this is no coincidence, okay? So she showed a map of the United States and all these areas that the Chinese own for agricultural farmland. And that's a whole nother conversation in and of itself. But the drone swarms coincidentally coincided with these areas that they owned. So, like in New Jersey, they were spraying chemicals out of these drones, and people were getting sick, and it was recorded, so it was a thing. And then the fact that they did nothing about it has something to do, and this is all I know what I know, what I don't know, I don't know, so is some agreements that they have, that the United States has with the Chinese, which is probably why Biden said and did nothing about it. Now we're in a new era. Trump is the president, and he's going to be renegotiating lots of different contracts. So he did have a press conference on the 21st, like he promised, but nobody asked him about the drones. It was all about Stargate, the new AI, and he wants to sell TikTok to one of his billionaire friends and partner with the United States. So that hasn't happened yet, but I think that, this is to be continued.
Yeah, and this is the guy you're talking about, Gordon
Yes,
Chang.
Gordon
I
Chang.
saw that
Thank you.
too, that a lot of the drone situations, particularly over military bases, were near Chinese bought farmland.
Yes, yes.
So,
So I don't think that's any coincidence, and it does make sense why people were reporting the chemicals being sprayed out of them. But here's a riddle for everyone. If we have drones, and we know that we do, that can spray different types of things, including fire. Okay, they can. I mean, I've seen this. They've done this. It's a thing. Okay, then why can't they fill a drone up with the slurry, the red stuff, and put the fires out? Just saying.
someone is asking, do you think the orb that some people are calling the orbs drones too, but the orbs that are being seen with the drones are conscious and aware?
Well, okay, so that's a good question because of the ET technology that has these living ships that have been seen and documented, videographed since the 90s, that had to do with, responding to the people on the ground. So that's a thing. In fact, my thing about the truth is stranger than fiction, Devin, and how, they show stuff in movies and TV so that we can understand these concepts. So if you guys remember Farscape, remember the series Farscape?
Yeah.
And that was all about this living ship. So the concept of that was put into there. And yes, I do believe that that exists. So take this to the next level. If these drones are reverse engineered alien technology that may appear to be like the real thing, the plasma, the communication with whomever is watching them or talking to them, so that this could be copied. Just saying.
I've never seen the show, but I'm guessing this is the ship
Yes.
behind them. That does kind of look like the orbs that we're seeing now.
Yes, and the ship responds to all of that's what was so unique about this series was that it responded to their thoughts and their feelings, and it was a living ship. So in the Bible, we have living ships, and there's nothing new under the sun, and it's called the Merkaba. And so, it had to do with living creatures responding to it. Also in the Bible, believe it or not, it's all there in the book of Ezekiel.
Now, I think it's been almost a week now. I don't know if you heard about this, but about a week ago, Stephen Greer had a podcast debut, and he said in about 72 hours he was going to drop some bombshells. He didn't seem to drop anything. The only thing that dropped in the time was Jacob Barber's News Nation appearance. Do you think he was referring to that or something else that he just never ended up announcing?
I can't speak for what is in his head or mind. Jacob Barber is the big story right now, and News Nation has put it out there. Ross Coulthart. So that's who I watch. I'm not really following Greer, to be honest with you. I was aware that he said that, but it didn't happen. But then there's lots of things he has said that hasn't happened. So,
Yeah, I was only bringing it up because it was all over the news when he said it, that expect disclosure in 72 hours. And that was literally about a week ago now. And the closest we've come is the thing with Coldheart. And what did you think about that program overall?
oh, I mean, he's my favorite, to be honest. He's my go-to. Ross Coldheart, Reality Check. I think he puts out very credible stories. And um, in terms of what um, Jacob Barber had testified to, well, this kind of dovetails into some of the material that we've been hearing for years about that the aliens see us as containers, and the Bible calls us vessels. So it's a thesaurus word. It's kind of one and the same thing, which confirms this cosmic battle that has been going on from deep antiquity over human beings, and that people can and do get possessed by them, and it's not always a good thing, and that there is harm that can come to people when they're interacting with unknown NHI. Um, I like that they're calling it NHI, non-human intelligence, instead of alien, because everybody seems to kind of like abuse that word. My first book, I was really into discerning these words so that we can discern who's who. So we first have to get the language straight. And the fact that they have now changed it to non-human intelligence, which equals an alien, but like people have been called aliens and they're not really non-human, they're human. Okay, so there's like a whole nother level of sorting things out there when you see something that is not one of us, and yet they look like they're one of us. They look human, but they're not human. So, I did a video. It's on my YouTube. I was walking on the beach because it disturbed me that Stephen Greer has this philosophy that if the aliens were a threat, they haven't killed us off by now. Why haven't they killed us off by now? Okay, so that philosophy or mindset is dangerous, in my opinion, because it does not include all the horrible things that happen on this planet to human beings. And my answer to him on my YouTube was, there are worse things than death. Okay, so the aliens, you just like, we can make analogies to humans and cows and other animals, chickens and things, and how they're more valuable to us alive. Chickens, I mean, they lay eggs, right? You don't want to kill all the chickens because you're going to get eggs from them. So why would, if the aliens see us as a farm and they're harvesting our energy or using us as containers or vessels for their agenda or their purpose, then why would they kill everybody? Okay, so that's kind of a moot argument as to say that they're not a threat. So back to Jake Barber, what happened to him was one of the, it goes into the category of injuries. I mean, his story is, I believe it. If you're asking me, what do I think? I think it's true, but who are these beings? And maybe it was the technology and not the beings, but we don't know. We need to learn more about that, what happened to him.
Yeah, because he received some physical injuries. Some of it is still ongoing, but at the same time, he experienced a euphoric feeling. So it may not have been intentional physical injury. Who knows? But what's your theory on that?
Well, for deep antiquity, Okay, this is, again, nothing new under the sun. There's a race of beings that are coexisting, living on our planet, living and dwelling inside the earth, that have been doing very similar stuff all along the timeline. And just because they're able to give you a high or a state of euphoria while at the same time, you know, drain your energy or take stuff from you, uh, I'm not convinced that they're benevolent. Okay. So just because somebody feels good or, oh, they see something doesn't make it benevolent. Okay. So that's my discernment on that. Um, does that make sense?
Yes. And you mentioned the under the ground alleged beings. I heard Tim Burchett, it could have been from an interview today, but it was definitely posted today, where he was saying he believes that there could be underwater bases if they are on Earth, and it wouldn't Earth, or at least have a base here, so they're not traveling light years away all the time, constantly. What are your thoughts on the underwater UAPs?
I am 100% convinced that they are living and dwelling within the earth, inside the earth, under the water, under the mountains, underground, inside the earth. I myself am witness to a USO in 1995. That's what started me to go down all these rabbit holes on the Gulf. Well, it's now called the Gulf of America, but it was the Gulf of Mexico on Indian Rocks Beach. After sunset, I witnessed a silver disc shaped craft emerge out of the ocean, you know, let all the water kind of like drain off of it, less than a minute, and shoot up into the sky. And it became like a star. That night, I wasn't a member of MUFON back then, but a friend of mine told me that there were 350 calls all along the beach that had called it in because people saw it from different angles. So I know what I saw. I know what I experienced. It was jaw dropping. It was life changing. And yes, they are living and dwelling with us. They coexist. That is the real coexist. They coexist with us inside the earth. That's why I call it the alien presence. So when I go into the Bible and I look at the Bible in a historical as a historical document, as a reference, we see this all over the place. And I publish this in my books. I mean, there were incidents in Bible stories of USOs. I think that the story of Jonah getting, stuck for 3 days inside the belly of a whale sounds like technology to me. So there's a lot of references of these beings coming and going inside the earth, not only from the past, but also the future. So the end time Bible prophecies give us this whole cast of characters, this whole zoo, this cosmic zoo of different creatures that are appointed, scheduled to come to surface, to emerge out of the ocean, out of the land, and come to the surface in the end times. And that also includes a group of human beings. So this is why my thing is, to correct this this false kind of Christian one-sided narrative that keeps, this mantra that they keep saying that all aliens are demons. And I say, no, all demons are aliens, but not all aliens are demons, because there are human beings that are living inside the earth. Now, where they came from, maybe breakaway civilizations from recent floods, but we know that they are, and there's intelligent, and there's so much evidence of this.
Someone wants to know if we have been their experiment from the beginning of time.
Well, that's a good question. Define the beginning of time. But yes, we have been since the last genetic manipulation. Let's just go there. So again, looking at the Bible as a historical viewpoint, the beginning of it tells us, first it starts off with a flood. Okay, so there were two floods in the Bible. The first one, Genesis 1:2, and the Spirit hovered over the waters of the earth. And then the Elohim, which means gods, plural in Hebrew, recreated the creatures, put the creatures on, and humans. Okay, and the human that was put on the earth then lived to be in the 900s. So we have a record of Methuselah, who lived to be 969. Now, this is very important and this is relevant because this has to do with genetic manipulation. Then came the second flood, which we call the floods of Noah. And, both of these floods, the first one, I believe, was the Atlantean flood. Atlantis and Lemuria went underwater. And I want to tell you something about that. About Zealandia. Have you seen that? Zealandia? No. So one of the end time prophecies, and this is so cool because it's relevant, because it's happening right now, is that new land masses are going to emerge and other land that we have is going to end up underwater. And that just happened. Okay, so there's a landmass that they're calling Zealandia, Zealandia, that has emerged. And this is in that area near New Zealand. It's, the South Pacific, which coincides with the historical of Lemuria. So you have to think when all this happened, some of the beings ended up going in. And this is something I published in my first book, that planets, in just generally speaking, okay, and this is a paradigm shift for us because we are surface dwellers, but most of the planets in the universe, even in the solar system, they're like spaceships in a way. So people, if anyone wants to dwell or live or use it as a stronghold of whatever, they go inside, they go under the surface, because that's where they're safe from the deleterious gamma rays of space. This is what makes sense. Earth, however, is a little different because we have this special atmosphere, we have this magnetosphere. So that's why we're on the surface. But these beings have been living inside for a long time. And this is it's in mythologies, so the Bible talks about the two floods. So you can say, well, breakaway civilizations could have happened from the first one, which was the Atlantis-Lemuria flood, and then the second one, which is the Noah flood. So after Noah's flood, people, human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, that's what we are, stopped living into the 900s or 800s. Our telomeres go up to 120. So most people are lucky if they live to be in their 80s. So there was a genetic manipulation right there. Okay, so yes, to your question, we have been, and we've been experimented on. We are not the top of the food chain. Okay, and this is also part of why the governments have been keeping a lot of this secret, because this goes back to the 1950s. Like Majestic 12, where these 12, high-ranking admirals and generals decided, how are we going to control the information? So, I've written a lot about this because it's true. They want to prepare the public. So they do it through what we call soft disclosure, not hard disclosure. So hard disclosure is kind of like what we've been experiencing, the whistleblowers coming forward, the government saying this, Tim Burchett is a congressman saying this, and that's more like hard. Soft disclosure is in the movies and the TV shows. So where do they get these concepts from? Okay, and so I have researched and found out that a lot of this, that Majestic 12, that original core group from the 50s, it was a think tank. they decided that they had to condition the public. They had to prepare the public. So they couldn't actually come out and say, oh, we have these beings, we have those beings, these are good, these are bad, we're worried about them. We're, because they, it's national security issues. And they know, because we've had stories, we've had whistleblowers that have told us this, that if people saw some of these beings, okay, they it's like the reptilians and what they look like, it's like your worst nightmares. So how do people handle it? So they want to keep everybody, like status quo, and they're working with certain groups of them to help them with the other groups. Okay, so how do we know that? Well, there's several things, and I've published all of this so people could piece it together and look at the research and, themselves. But a big, huge whistleblower that came out at the end of 2020, Chaim Eshed, who was the retired Israeli space chief, who wrote a book, Universe and Beyond, which came out after he became a whistleblower and told the main newspaper, Yedidot Achronot, which is kind of like the equivalent to the New York Times here in Israel, that the United States and Israel were in working agreements with the Galactic Federation on Earth, and that President Trump knew about it, that they were sharing astronauts and bases on Mars. Okay, so that should connect some dots to
Were you able to read that book, because you lived in Israel, right? So you could probably read Hebrew.
Yes. Well, I mean, some of it is very sort of like astrophysics, because he was a physicist, he was a professor. But what I did was I extracted the parts about the UFO crashes, because he lists all these crashes. There's like about 13 of them all around the world, including the Magenta, Italy crash that we heard about from David Grosh in July of 23. That was in his book. And other ones as well in Israel and in Russia. And there were beings that were retrieved from these crashes. And in one incident, they were human, not gray aliens. They were human beings. And he wrote that there were oxygen apparatus attached to them. So I do have 13 pages that I have extracted of excerpts, just focusing on this, not the other stuff. And I send it to anyone who wants it for free. You just need to contact me through my website, and I will email it to you in a PDF.
Very interesting, because that's the Italy one. You were David Grush was saying in his News Nation interview that was the first time the U.S. ended up getting a crash retrieval, because they eventually got their hands on that Italy crash, right?
Well, I think they share stuff, but I according to what Eshed said, was the Germans came and collected all the material from Italy, because it was 1933, I believe, or 32 or 33. So the Germans were very involved in that, and that was, became very competitive for them to get this technology and reverse engineer it. And I also document in my fourth book, Covenants, about all about the what the Germans were doing with all this tech, and that they were given spaceships by these reptilians from inside the earth to help the Germans to genocide the Jews. Can't make this stuff up. And it's all documented. So if anybody wants that story, including the fact that, and I also connected it with the Vatican, that the Pope at the time during World War II was working with Hitler and they had their own death camp in Poland because they had people they considered undesirables that they wanted to purge. This is all history. And the alien tech was definitely part of that. And there's no coincidence why the Vatican today, okay, has all these doctrines about what we call exopolitics now, which is how would you deal with the aliens? And they're ready to baptize them. And they actually have a book about it. The Pope has a doctrine about it. It's been written into the Vatican. The two of the world's most sophisticated telescopes on the Earth, are called Lucifer, and they're owned by the Vatican. Two of their Jesuit astronomer priests are in charge of them. One of them is on Vatican Hill in Rome, and the other one is here in America on Mount Graham in Tucson, Arizona.
So why should people take what Chaim Mashed said seriously? Like, could you just go a bit more into his background and like how he would have been putting himself at risk coming out with this? I know he was in his 80s, right, when he put that out?
88, yes. And there's something about the octogenarians becoming whistleblowers. We've seen this before. William extraterrestrials, what is his selected by extraterrestrials. I mean, he was one. The Canadian Heller, he was in his 80s. So there's something about that.
Yeah. I actually did one of his last interviews with him before he passed away.
Oh, that's cool. Wonderful. Yeah, and it's still relevant, his words, his videos. So back to Chaim Mashed. I'm sorry, William Tompkins. Sorry, I didn't say his last name, but he was another octogenarian who was a lifelong aerospace engineer, and he literally worked with the Nordic tall blondes, we call them, but they're not all blonde. Some of them have brown hair. And his books are called Selected by Extraterrestrials. So another one. So there's something about the middle of the 80s. They probably feel they have nothing left. And he said this, he has nothing to lose. He's had this long, Chaim Mashed said that he had nothing to lose. He has this long, illustrious career as a, professor. He was the space chief, Israeli defense. He was the top guy for a long time. So, it's really hard to poke holes in someone that is so credible. And so far, his stories seem to be panning out because of the Mars piece. So he said that, that they're sharing astronauts on these bases on Mars. Now, even though Trump said in his inaugural speech, we're going to Mars, kind of like John F. Kennedy said, we're going to the moon at the end of the decade, and they did, and we're going to Mars. So I look at it kind of like an answering machine. Remember the old answering machines in the 90s when people leave a message and then you're out and you don't get home for a while and then you get it like a week later. And that's how it is with the Mars story. We're starting to get this, we're behind in terms of the time. They're already on Mars. Okay. They've been there for a while. I published this in my first book, and you guys people are going to be hearing a lot more about this. So in 1980, they had experiments with time travel technology. They called it a Mars jump room, where they got into some elevator and they ended up on Mars. Okay, I know this sounds like science fiction, but the truth is stranger than fiction. And the people who were involved in that are still, many of them are still alive. One of them is Andrew Basiago. And he gave me his story to put into my book. He edited it because I wanted to make sure I had all the facts straight. And there's a list of 14 of them, all whistleblowers that testified to it. And I know this sounds bizarre and crazy and like, whoa, you can't make this stuff up. But it makes perfect sense to me that Barry Soetoro, who we now know as Barack Obama, was in that class, and his mother and his grandfather were sort of in charge of it. And the grandfather was a lifelong CIA agent, and the mother was put in charge of this. And this is his testimony. Okay, so they went to Mars. There's books written about it. Randy Kramer, he spent 20 years on Mars, 5 minutes, like he was gone for 5 minutes on Earth. There's 4 different species that Andy said were living on Mars, like a plesiosaurus type creature, like lizard, big lizards, but not as big as the dinosaurs. Gray aliens, humans. There's underground. They're inside. And people need weapons. They need guns to protect themselves from these creatures. So these are the stories that we've heard. I published this in 2012. So when Chaim Eshed said this in 2020, I took notice because there's another corroborative story about the people on Mars.
Right. And this is Chaim Eshed, if anyone hasn't seen him before. He was also a brigadier general, and I guess he's 92 now.
Yes.
So, I mean, he's at the end of his run, and he's very accomplished. One thing that Paul Hellyer told me when I interviewed Paul Hellyer, this was before the Chaim Eshed book came out, he talked about the Galactic Federation that Chaim also talked about. And there's some people that talk about a different galactic federation.
Yes. Yes. And I wanted to make a point of that. I'm so glad you brought that up, Devin. So you hear of people talk about the Galactic Federation of Worlds, the Galactic Federation of Light. Okay. He very specifically used the words the Galactic Federation on Earth. Okay. So I find that a discernment because these are beings that are based and live and coexist within the earth with us. And they're the ones that they're working with. Okay. And in my opinion, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe they're also the ones that are showing up at these nuclear facilities and shutting down or thwarting our nuclear capabilities and technologies. I'm sure you've heard all those stories too, right? And maybe they are trying to save us from ourselves because they live here too. They're invested in this planet and they don't want us to blow ourselves up. And one more thing added to that, there's a lot of people on the surface of the planet who pray to God that, to keep us safe, send angels so that people don't use nuclear weapons again. And just maybe God is using these beings to thwart this nuclear threat. Just a hypothesis.
I recently heard someone else that used to work at one of these military bases come out. I guess he could be considered a whistleblower too, because he said there's been some talk of him testifying in front of Congress. I forget his name exactly, but his theory after having a UFO experience was they might be using this nuclear connection to test our level of intelligence, because our ability to build these type of bombs and stuff, and also create nuclear energy, really shows our intelligence levels. So they might be using that to gauge how advanced we are intelligently.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But clearly, if they have bases on Earth and in the water, it might not just be for the good of human beings. That they care about whether or not we start dropping these bombs.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's more to us than just our technology. You would hope, right? How about the inner technology? That's what people have to focus on, so that we can evolve out of this, cycle. But it's going to happen anyway, whether what we do or not, because that's where we're going. The end time prophecies. This world is going to get folded up, and there's going to be a new era, a new millennia, and human beings. So this is the promises of the Messiah, that he returns and restores all things, including us. And human beings, it says, will live to be 1,000 years old again. Now, how about that? So the genetic experiments that have been going on for the recent millennia, since the floods of Noah, all that's going to end. And we get restored almost like back to Eden, but better. And the earth becomes heaven on earth. That's the prophecy. Okay, so this is what people put their hope into at the end of this age. And the ages, there's like 3 different wheels that are like connecting and clicking all at the same time. So it's a convergence of 3 cycles coming together at the same time. So, we have this Nemesis Nibiru system coming into our solar system, intersecting here. We're going to get a flyby, a passage from Nibiru again. That hasn't happened yet. It's still out there, but its system is here. Okay, it's like a parade. All these pieces precede it. So we're seeing that. We're seeing the Earth changing and shifting because of the perturbations on all the planets, including the sun, from this system. We have pictures of it. We have video of it. It's happening. And that is probably why, like back in the 1980s, when President Ronald Reagan saw, the NASA showed him their first picture that came back from the IRIS probe in 1982, and it was of Nibiru, and it had the wings. So it's a comet planet because it has 2 tails. They're like comet tails, but the planet itself is, solid. And that's when he wrote an executive order to basically cover it all up. And that's when he started this SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, which he himself dubbed the Star Wars system. So, and here now, fast forward, we're now in the Trump era, and Trump's parallels Reagan in many, many ways. And he created the Space Force in his last term. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that in this term. And they're very much aware of the alien threat.
What did Chaim Hashad specifically say about Donald Trump in the book, from what you were able to gather?
Oh, well, this was also published in the newspaper at the end of November of 20, Yedidot Achronot. He basically said that about the Galactic Federation on Earth, the agreements, and Donald Trump knew about it. I mean, he didn't go into what he knew. He just said he knew about that. He knew about the agreements between the United States and Israel in working agreements with the Galactic Federation on Earth. But the Galactic Federation on Earth said that we humans, or the surface humans, were not ready yet for them to be revealed to us, for them to know about us. But they didn't say why. And I added my own reasons why,
Which are?
Well, back to the inner technology. Okay, so very simple. If we can't accept each other, okay, how are we going to accept ET? That's different from us. So let's use the old canary in the coal mine analogy. Okay, so the old miners used to put a canary in the coal mines, and if the canary flew back out, then they knew it was safe to go in because of the gases. There wasn't toxic gases that they were going to die from. If the canary didn't come out, then they knew there was toxic gases, right? So what do we have on Earth as an analogy? We have anti-Semitism. We have racism. We have people hating on each other, wanting to literally genocide groups of people. Why? Okay. So what, all the wars, World War I, World War II, and World War III are all connected. Okay. And you can't make this stuff up. And there's no coincidence here. Okay. There is a force on this planet that is waging war against the creator God that put humans on the earth. And this is evidenced in all the ancient scripts, the stories, the Bible, everything, as well as our history. So why did the reptilians hand Hitler a spaceship to help him genocide the Jews? Okay, why are the reptilians behind these jihadists that also want to genocide the Jews and wipe Israel off the face of the earth? Okay, and these are our.
How do you know that? I'm just wondering.
How do I know what?
About the reptilians having connection to all that stuff going on in Israel right now.
Well, that's the research that I found and published in my 4th book, Covenants. It's all in there, all the research. People can look it up. I have my bibliographies are 35 to 40 pages long. So, you just can't make this stuff up. And I encourage everyone to do their own research too, but that's what I found. Okay. And this is from, documentation and all kinds of historical pieces and the stuff that you have to look at why they want to suppress this group. What is it about that group that they want to get rid of? Okay. So, if you look at the Hall of Fame, so to speak, right? All these Jewish people for decades, okay, have been they're 75, 80% of them are all in the Hall of Fame. They're all Jews because they're inventors. They've contributed all this stuff to the planet, okay? Science, inventions, technologies. I mean, the Iron Dome, for instance, that Trump is now going to build here in America. Okay, it's Israeli technology, innovation.
What is that exactly? That's supposed to protect us against missiles, right?
Yes.
What it's not an actual dome, right? Could you explain what that is, if you know?
Well, a little bit. I mean, I'm not, an physicist, but from what I understand, it's a force field that when the missiles come, it basically nullifies them in the air. And the reason I think they call it a dome is because it has to do with a force field, an energy field that sort of envelops over a certain radius. So when Israel gets attacked by all these missiles, the Iron Dome thwarts and nullifies and blows them up before they hit the land. And it's turned on for Israel's not that big. I mean, it's not even as big as the state. It's the state of New Jersey is bigger than Israel. It's not a whole lot of land there. So I'm sure there's limitations in the technology, but the point is that the Israelis innovated and created it. It's their technology. The United States funded it. So we're partners in it, which is why Trump is getting the technology to use here.
And you live there again, so you know all about that. There's been a couple of people asking about these balls of light washing ashore in Australia. Could they be waste from an underground alien base? Someone is wondering. Have you heard about these?
Washing in Australia be waste.
Apparently they've closed beaches over in Australia.
What, big balls? Like big spheres or little?
Maybe that person can provide more clarification. I haven't heard anything about it either. So you mentioned the reptilians. There's the Greys. What other beings could you tell us about? How many races are there that you know of?
Well, my first book, I published 150 different species. So some of them are actually like subspecies of the same race. Um, so, like for instance, the grays. According to my research that came from whistleblowers, there's 35 different species of grays. So I list them all in my book. So, like I spell grays Gray, okay, as opposed to Grey, because Grey is the color gray, and not all gray species are actually colored gray. Some of them are tan and brown and white and green and navy and metallic, and so a gray species is mixed up. They're like hybrids, they're cybergenetic Borgs, they're mixed with artificial intelligence. A lot of them have a hive mind mentality, meaning they're ordered to do certain things. And if somebody comes and disrupts their orders, they don't listen, they just drop it because they're programmed to do a certain thing. And I included some stories about that in my book, like for instance with abductions, and these are stories from people who aren't even religious, but they knew because somebody told them, oh, demons tremble in the name of Jesus, so I'm calling on the name of Jesus, and the gray would just drop them at like a hot potato. So that has something to do with programming and authority and hierarchy, which I've detailed in the book, that the reptilians have this hierarchy, very kind of like a militaristic type hierarchy. And, they're in different classes, and they are the overlords of most of the grays. Now, I say most, not all, because you have this human group of what they call Nordics, tall whites, the blondes. They have different names, Syrians, and they're human, and they order grays around as well. So one of them had said, grays are like a commodity. Anyone can have a gray, just like we have, cell phones. Everyone can have a cell phone, and you program it and do your thing. And that's how they viewed the grays. So the grays are sent up to the surface to do their bidding. That's why they're always involved in the abductions. But who's behind them is really where we need to go with, figuring out who's who in the cosmic zoo. And in my opinion, the reptilians are behind most of the grays.
Interesting. Now, for these mystery balls, I was looking them up while you were talking. They're
Ah,
smaller balls. I guess they've been
oh,
showing up all over Australia, but they've discovered they don't know the origins, but they're composed of human
oh,
feces,
ooh,
drugs, and cooking oils.
ooh,
And yeah,
that's nasty.
they don't know where. I guess they're showing up everywhere, but they don't know where they're from.
I
So
was going to say it looked like elephant dung, but
yeah, but there's drug. Apparently, there's drugs in them. So I don't know what.
oh,
Guess
that's
that's quite a
nasty.
mystery. It
Yeah,
hasn't really made the news in the U.S. too much yet.
I'm not getting an intuitive hit that it's alien or ET, especially if it's human feces and drugs. You know,
That's
uh,
bizarre.
that's
It
nasty.
doesn't seem like it doesn't seem natural.
No, no, that's
That's
weird. Well, thanks for sharing.
yeah. Thank you to the Australia fans on there. So tell us a little bit about your books, and they can get them on your website, which I'll put up on the page now.
So it's a book series, nonfiction, discerning the disclosure of the alien presence. Um, so I'm just, you teach what you need to learn. It's something I had to learn. So I'm sharing everything that I have learned. It's all my research about who's who. It's obviously an ongoing conversation and discussion, and we're all growing and evolving. So I hope um, that people can get an understanding from the dots that I connect. There's 6 books available right now. The most recent one is Heaven's Witness, which is focused on cosmology, the stars, the meaning of the original meaning of the stars, and how we're connected to that, because there's a star heritage in a lot of humans. So I hope it helps people to understand what's happening.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot going on. Do you think one of the things that Tim Burchett said, I recently interviewed him, that he could see back in December, in the next 4 or 5 months, President Trump making some type of disclosure about maybe there being an existence of non-human intelligence? Could you see that happening in the next 4 or 5 months, as Mr. Burchett said?
Well, I hope so, but I wouldn't hold my breath that it's going to be Trump, although that could happen. But I think that the people that he has put in place in these key positions in his cabinet, he has a mandate. Okay, so the Senate and the House and the White House are all now under Republican rule. So they're going to get a lot of stuff done. And yes, all of the people that he has put in place have all said that they want more transparency in government. So the way I see disclosure is like a tapestry. Okay, so if you pull one thread out of the tapestry, the whole thing's going to unravel. So there are many threads that hold up this truth embargo, this era of cover up that we've all been in. Money is a big piece. Okay, our Congress is determined to get to the bottom of where all these missing funds went to. Trump, I think, through the things that he's doing to change the government, will inevitably bring disclosure. But disclosure of UFOs, disclosure of the alien presence, that's one level of it. There's also disclosure of the experimentations, the healthcare system, okay, which is kind of all connected, the technology, the med beds, okay, that they have, that, I think that's, part of Greer's thing is, working to get that technology into the public realm. And if anyone is going to do that, it is going to be Trump, because he's a businessman. He wants to make a deal. So I think that we're in for a ride, to see all these pieces come together. Whether it's going to be the whole enchilada, I would not expect that, because I believe that national security is a very important piece, and they're not going to disclose everything. But the pieces that they can disclose, the different individuals that are going to bring it, the different departments that is going to have this piece and that thread, yes, I think we're going to see a lot. But if everyone thinks that, President Trump is going to announce something on the White House lawn, I personally wouldn't hold my breath to that. And considering our history of why, for instance, JFK was assassinated, and he's releasing his files, I just read today. So that's coming down the pike. That's a disclosure. Okay. So, Trump's already had 2 assassination attempts on his life. I think, I believe he wants to complete this second term, and it may come from other sources, not from him. Just saying.
Glenn wants to know if you know anything about the German time machine called the Bell. You were talking about time machines earlier. I guess it was also called the Die Glock.
Yes. That is documented in my book Covenants, which has all these pieces about what happened during that war, and that was a piece of it. And yes, they were experimenting with different types of alien technology, but they never actually completed that one. So from my research, what I understand is that it got transferred. The Allies basically took the spoils of war from the Nazis, ended up in Antarctica, and they were doing a lot of stuff down there. The Philadelphia experiment was like what the next piece of that was. They were experimenting with that, and then the Philadelphia experiment kind of morphed into the Montauk Project, and then the Montauk Project ended up morphing into Project Pegasus and the Mars Jump Room that I was telling you about that happened in 1980. So all that is detailed in my fourth book, Covenants.
Very interesting. And the last thing I'll ask you about is for the Chinese balloons. Did you ever hear anything more about what the other three objects were that were shot down after the Chinese spy balloon? Because I mean, there was pictures of the spy balloon after. There was later a picture revealed of the one in Canada before it was shot down, but it didn't really look like a balloon, but nothing about the other two. And Biden never really answered what they were, and we were just kind of just went away, that story. Did you hear anything about what happened there?
I did hear that they were spy balloons. That's all I know. I think the last administration was colluding with the Chinese on multiple levels, so that's why we didn't hear more about it. I think that this administration, there's going to be more transparency. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to come out about what happened in the last 4 years, and that's probably a piece of it.
Well, very good. Thanks a lot for checking in with us and answering all the fan questions. I'll let you close this down with whatever you wanted to say to close it down. Thanks.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Devin. It's always good to talk to you. Yeah, just keep looking up, and we're in for a ride. I mean, there's a lot of changes coming this year. So inner technology, get your soul right. That's all that counts.